Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at Move 1 within the discussion results section of research papers. We previously talked about the discussion conclusion section as a whole, and we said that there were 4 moves within that discussion section. Today we're going to focus just on Move 1, Reestablishing the Territory. Of course, remember that even though we're discussing these in linear order, these moves can appear in different types of orders depending on the needs of your study and of your discipline as a whole. So Move 1, Reestablishing the Territory, is the place where authors prepare the reader for the following discussion. And we can accomplish this by providing relevant background information that can help contextualize our discussion. And this information that we might provide our readers could be empirical information, theoretical information, and can include either study-specific details and statements of the principal findings of your study. This information may or may not have already been introduced in your paper. It could have been in the results section, for example. And remember, as we've discussed in the overview, if your conclusion section is separate, the information can be structured in different ways. For this move in particular, if you've got a separate conclusion section, this move could be used to summarize the main points in order to really provide background for that conclusion that you're building. So let's look at the steps within this move. There are 4 steps within the first move, and all of these steps are either may exist or may not exist in the discussion conclusion section of your particular research article. We're going to go through each step separately, and I'll discuss the general purpose of the step, the different ways that authors can indicate the step, and give you an example so you can see how the step can actually look in different, how it could look in different fields. As I said with the moves, remember that even though we are walking through the steps one by one and in a linear order, these steps can appear in various orders, and that they can overlap with each other depending on your field and the precise needs of your particular study. Okay, so we've got these 4 steps: drawing on general background, drawing on study-specific background, announcing principal findings, and previewing content. Let's look at the first step in more detail. The first step here, drawing on general background, functions to really set the stage for a broader reflection on your study or the principal findings of that study. And we can do this by bringing in theoretical or empirical knowledge or other sorts of general background information with or without referencing previous works. So we use this step to really provide some needed informational background to point to problems, issues, gaps that motivated our study, kind of to remind readers why we ended up looking at the study in the first place, to provide some sort of conceptual framework for the reader as they really engage with our discussion of the results, and to show how the current study that you're writing fits within the particular research field. So let's look at this example here. We've got irrigation water with high salt concentration causing electrical conductivities of the soil saturation extract between 3 and 6 is often used without considering the negative effects of poor quality water on olive tree growth and productivity. So I've underlined a few words here that can help us really see how the sentence is functioning. And we see that irrigation water is often used, is what I've highlighted for you. And this sentence really provides us with some background information, namely this information about how irrigation water is used, irrigation water with high salt content is used in agriculture. And they've got one citation here in parentheses, which helps us kind of can also help us identify that there's perhaps some general information going on. Okay, the next step we want to discuss is called drawing on study-specific background. And this step really helps function to set the ground for more reflection on your study or for recounting the principal findings. And we can do this by talking about study-specific information, things like your methods or approaches, the experiment, procedures, analysis, hypothesis, research question, all of those details that go into making your study can be recounted here to provide kind of a narrow framework for understanding the particular results. And we use this step to help remind readers of some of these important specific study details that are relevant to the particular findings. They can help the reader really understand how the results were obtained, and also to help kind of draw connections between certain study specifics and the results that you found out. So really kind of highlighting that connection of what you did and how that is connected to your particular results. And that connection could be possibly lost if the study specifics were left in the methodology and the findings were separate here. And in this step, authors often can point to some sort of visual representation, graphs, tables, charts, to really carry out this function. So we have a sample sentence here. We have the advantage of using both GUI-duck and tree ring data was that both proxies corroborated one another to provide independent verification of SST trends, yet also contributed somewhat differing aspects of the climate signal. So in this sentence, we've highlighted a few words, but we've got some information about the specific details of this author's study, the advantage of using these two aspects. So not only do we have some details of their specific study, we also have an explanation about kind of connecting the methods, these two different types of data, to some of the results and how that is useful for these particular authors. Let's look at our third step. This is announcing principal findings. And this step functions to really set the ground for reflection on those principal findings. And we use this step to highlight the most important findings, to show how your research objectives were achieved, and to show which of your findings really make a contribution to the discipline at large. And you really to discuss in a broad sense what your findings mean. So again, this step, like the one before it, can be achieved through the use of charts, graphs, and other sorts of visual representations. So we've got one example here. This example says, in sterile hybrids bearing D. persimilis X chromosomes, all three genes assayed were significantly underexpressed, consistent with their severe gonadal atrophy and the likely transcription of these genes in the testes or germline. So we've got some information about the particular results of the study. So the authors are restating this sort of finding and also starting to provide us with some interpretation of that finding, a reason that this likely occurred. Okay, here's the last step we want to talk about in Move 1, and this step is called previewing content. This step really functions to indicate the structure or the content of the entire discussion or conclusion sections. And we can use this step to help orient the reader to what is going to happen in this section, and also to highlight noteworthy features of what's going to happen, to really to draw their attention to certain key things we want our reader to be aware of in our paper. So we've got an example here, and it says, in this section, we report the discovery of a previously unidentified signal transduction pathway between the plasma membrane and the nucleus. So you can see the author is really setting up the entire discussion conclusion section for the readers. They're saying, here's what we're going to discuss, and making sure that the readers don't lose track of this important piece of information. They're outlining the content. And of course, this helps hopefully reinforce the idea that even though these steps we've gone through in order, they can really occur in any place. So a step like this could often occur at the very beginning of Move 1, or of a discussion discussion conclusion section in general. Excuse me. Okay, now's the chance for you to figure out what function the particular sentence is serving. So I'm going to give you a sentence like this. Please pause your video and take a moment to read through it and try to decide which step the sentence is most closely functioning as, and then we'll discuss it together. Okay, did you get a chance to look at this one? So this sentence says, in this study, a two-dimensional model of CFD technique has been used to describe the gas and liquid velocity distribution in slurry bubble column for three-phase reactor containing a non-Newtonian liquid. Okay, what we have here is some information about the particular study that the authors have conducted. When we see that highlighted right at the very beginning, right? In this study. And then we get some information showing us that this is information that the authors used when they were conducting their study. A two-dimensional model has been used. Right? So we have this indication that this has happened in the past. The authors have used this model. And so this is an example of the step drawing on study-specific background. Okay, here's another step. Please pause your video. Okay, do you have an idea what this one's doing? It says, it has been demonstrated, mainly in legumes, that movement of amino acid from xylem to phloem is quantitatively relevant in supplying fruit sinks with N. Okay, what did you think? Did you think that it was information about drawing on general background? If so, you're right. And we have some information here that can help us see that. We've got, it has been demonstrated. So this likely means that the authors aren't talking about themselves. They're talking about other people's work. Someone has demonstrated that, and then we have what they've demonstrated. We also have a series of citations here. So we've got the author and year for a whole bunch of citations. And so that's another piece of indication that this is some drawing on general background information. Okay, so not study-specific information, but general background information. Okay, here's another sentence. Okay, this sentence says, finally, we will raise important implications concerning the role of membrane compartmentalization and endocytic transport in signal transduction. Okay, this step, it's clearly listing part of a list of what the authors are going to be discussing. And this is the final step in that, right? So they say, finally, we will raise important implications. The authors are previewing the content. They're saying, here's what we're going to discuss in the rest of this section of our paper. One more for you. Okay, this step says, concerning G. rostochinasis, two Swedish populations, Kibi and Grindelstad, both virulent on H1 gene-resistant cultivars, differ clearly from each other and from all other populations. Okay. This one here, we get some information about the particular results that the authors found. They found two Swedish populations, and that these populations differ clearly from each other and from all other populations. So this is a place where they've announced their principal findings, and we can infer that this is something that's very important for us to be understanding for this particular paper, because they've announced it here in the discussion conclusion section. Okay, so your next steps, you've got a few more steps to look at. You've got your reading, and that will help you really look at the different steps within Move 1. And, you know, as we've discussed with the overview and here, the different steps and the different moves occur in lots of different orders depending on your particular field. So your next task, doing the corpus exploration, can really help you see how what we've discussed gets realized in your own particular discipline. And then there's the quiz to help you make sure that you're solidifying all your knowledge. In our next presentations, we're going to examine moves 2, then 3, then 4 of the discussion and conclusion section.